Hi, folks. Partha Chatterjee speaking here. And I just wanted to say thanks for taking a few minutes out of your day to hear some of our thoughts and analyses of the proposed anti-kickback statute rule, specifically regarding the comments, recent CBO report, and other industry rumblings. I know everyone is really busy, so I'm going to try to make sure to keep this as short and to the point as possible. Just a quick FYI on Akara. And for those that are unfamiliar with our firm and what we do, we are a consulting and technology firm that specializes in managed markets. Over our time, we've had experience in forecasting, gross to net, government pricing, operations and launch, and M&A. Probably unfamiliar to many folks is the fact that we launched our forecasting contract analytics platform called Simply, which can actually help you model the proposed rule and see what the change in your liabilities might be if we were to move away from current rebating to a GNUP-based model. If anybody else is interested in learning more about our capabilities, feel free just to reach out. So just to level set a little, as you all know, the proposed rule and its affiliated comments, et cetera, have broad policy and operational implications. Because of that breadth, there will be a lot that we don't address, such as every comment, et cetera. That said, there will be a lot that we do cover, and we hope that you find that insightful. And as a matter of housekeeping, if you have any questions or comments or feedback, feel free to email either Romit or myself. And finally, if you are interested in hearing our initial thoughts on the proposed rule, just check out our website and you could see what some of our perspectives were when the rule first came out. All right, so let's start off with the comments. So as many of you may have heard, the proposed rule had a little over 19,000 comments, loosely distributed across pharmacies, payers, Medicaid stakeholders, manufacturers, and the bulk coming from patient advocacy groups and HCPs. That was almost about 90% of all the comments. Admittedly, most of the comments were bot driven, meaning somebody could easily just hit a yes, I do support this rule or not. But the theme was pretty clear, where a little less than 5 of the comments were not in support of the proposed rule. So basically, this proposed rule across all of the commenters was overwhelmingly in favor. So when reviewing the comments, we tried to distill the narrative across the various stakeholders. In general, and as I mentioned before, most of the commenters were in strong support of the proposed rule. Unsurprisingly, this support varies depending on the stakeholders, wherein patient advocacy groups, manufacturers, and pharmacies were in strong support. Unsurprisingly, of course, payers were not big fans. Perhaps most interestingly to me was that stakeholders in Medicaid were in strong support, but didn't really see the appropriateness or the need for Medicaid. That just didn't dawn on me that they would be the Medicaid stakeholders would have such a strong voice in countering the proposal. But despite the general support across all the stakeholders, there were some policy concerns. I'm not going to spend the time reading all these sentiments. You guys, frankly, can read this on your own time when you guys are comfortable and have the luxury. But just wanted to highlight a few of the more interesting points. So if we start off with the patient advocacy groups and healthcare providers, as I mentioned earlier, unsurprisingly, these stakeholders were strongly in favor of the proposed rule. If there are any concerns expressed at all, they really were centered on ensuring that there were no unintended consequences, and I put that in big, bold, in quotes, with respect to patients. Specifically, they challenged the idea that the proposed rule would reduce premiums. They were worried about adverse reactions by payers and how they might manage their costs through more restrictions on their formularies. One of the more interesting comments had to do with making sure the government addressed how the point of sale discount should be addressed as part of the Part D's beneficiaries TROOP, or true out-of-pocket cost, and how they would move through the coverage gap. Effectively, would they be ushering in, or how this would be captured as they move through the donut hole into CAT coverage. As we heard from a number of our clients, manufacturers that commented were in full support of the proposed rule. Similar to patient groups, and manufacturers did have some concerns about how plans would shift the risk and costs, specifically around admin fees. Finally, from the Medicaid perspective, as I mentioned earlier, commenters had a near universal message that the proposed rule made sense, but that it wasn't really applicable to Medicaid given the little to no copay by those beneficiaries. In addition, commenters were clear that Medicaid supplementals needed to be explicitly excluded from the scope of the proposed rule. And that obviously makes sense. And I don't think that was the intent on the repeal, on the proposal of the repeal of the anti-kickback statute in the first place. From an operations standpoint, pharmacies were pretty vocal. To me, the most interesting comment was how one comment noted that the chargeback model was likely, in quotes, sorry, was likely misunderstood by HHS, and that it wasn't really a fit unless we introduced patient-level information into the chargeback process. So my colleagues and I were joking that we were basically making a chargeback record look like a traditional managed care claim, so why would we even want to reinvent the wheel? I guess that's the way that it works sometimes. Payers also commented that the timeline for implementation of 1/1/20 would be nearly impossible. I'm not sure if they're talking about a full-scale implementation or just part of the proposed rule, but in any event, there seemed to be a big concern about the timing. Manufacturers, unsurprisingly, had many operational concerns, things like clarity for fair market value and GP calcs. I strongly suspect that if the proposed rule goes through, CMS would be prompted to release some clarity on these point-of-sale discounts. I think, obviously, the real question is, what would be the timing of that guidance? All right, so transitioning towards the recent CBO report. As you're probably aware of, CBO released their findings earlier this month, noting that the proposed rule would in fact increase overall spending by about $177 billion. Of all their rationale, the one that jumped out to me had to do with their hypothesis that there would be an increase in spending on higher cost products. I find this particularly interesting because I wonder if HHS considered that the patients can now take expensive products at a cheaper price, but the value of that expensive product may push them faster through the donut hole into catastrophic coverage. And as I understand it, when patients hit CAT coverage, there is some shared risk between Medicare and the plan. So again, I'm not sure if this was captured, but I would hope so. Okay, so crystal ball time. So what does this all mean? So if you had asked me prior to May, I would have said that the momentum was clearly in favor of the proposed rule going through, or at least some part of it. But now I have to be honest, I'm just not so sure. With the CBO report, CMS recently asking for payer pilots as part of risk corridors, plus a recent BioCentury article saying that policy leaders for both the White House and Congress are considering killing the proposed rule in favor of spending caps. I'm not sure if this is going to happen. Furthermore, the proposed rule introduces subtle but notable impacts to coverage gap. I'm not a lawyer and I don't know the legal intricacies here, but I do know that there is a lot more complexity around opening up Part D and talking about what counts to a beneficiary's creditable coverage, if you will. That all said, there is a difference between policy and practice. There are principles of the proposed rule already underway. As many of you may have already seen, a lot of the 2020 Part D RFPs are already embracing the GNUP-based model. Furthermore, I strongly suspect nothing is going to change for Medicaid simply because there's really little to no value there. So that's all we had to share. I hope you found this discussion helpful and insightful. What we're leaving on the slide here for you guys to take away are some fun comments that we were able to distill from the proposed rule. As is probably clear, we are geeks for this stuff. So if you'd like to continue the dialogue, just let us know. In addition, if you want to see how simply our forecasting and contract analytics platform can help you model the proposal, let us know that too. At the very least, you might find it helpful to see how your liabilities might change and how you could be prepared for that. Thanks, folks. We hope you have a great day, and we'll speak to you soon.